Sometimes the smartest people in the room miss the simplest solution, and psychology knows exactly why. Knowledge carries a powerful reputation. Civilizations celebrate knowledge as the ultimate advantage, the invisible tool that sharpens decisions, accelerates problem-solving, and turns uncertainty into clarity. Libraries, universities, and entire intellectual traditions exist because of one shared belief: more knowledge leads to better thinking. Yet psychology reveals a strange and slightly uncomfortable truth. Under certain conditions, knowledge quietly begins to work against us. The very experience that once helped us solve problems can start guiding our thinking down the same narrow road again and again. Psychologists call this phenomenon the Einstellung Effect. Yes, the phrase sounds provocative, almost paradoxical. The Einstellung Effect describes a subtle mental trap where previously learned solutions dominate our thinking so strongly that new possibilities disappear from view. A familiar answer steps forward immediately, while better alternatives remain hidden in the background. In simple terms, the Einstellung Effect occurs when an existing method of solving a problem blocks the mind from exploring new approaches. The brain recognizes a pattern, retrieves a solution from memory, and moves forward with impressive speed. Efficiency rises, yet creativity quietly shrinks. Experience becomes a filter, shaping how every new problem appears. Human life revolves around decisions. Every day unfolds as a continuous chain of choices and problem-solving moments. Some decisions arrive gently and pass through life without leaving a trace. A spoon of sugar in coffee, a quick glance at the sky before stepping outside, a jacket or no jacket. These tiny decisions barely ripple across the surface of daily life. Larger decisions carry a very different weight. Choosing a new home, selecting a school, deciding whether to change careers or remain on a familiar path. These moments shape the architecture of our future. A single decision can influence years of experience, relationships, and opportunities. Problems follow the same pattern of scale. Some challenges barely interrupt the day. A stubborn food package that refuses to open, a misplaced set of keys. Minor obstacles that dissolve within minutes. Other problems arrive with the gravity of long-term consequences. Financial uncertainty, professional crossroads. Life directions that demand careful thinking and thoughtful judgment. Psychological research suggests that a large portion of our decisions emerge almost automatically. The human brain evolved to move quickly through complex environments. Instead of carefully analyzing every possible option, the mind often relies on intuitive shortcuts, mental tools that produce fast answers with minimal effort. These shortcuts, often called heuristics, allow us to function efficiently in a world filled with endless information. Without them, everyday life would feel painfully slow. Even simple decisions would require exhausting amounts of analysis. In many situations, this mental efficiency works beautifully. The brain recognizes patterns, retrieves familiar solutions, and adapts rapidly to challenges. A problem appears, the mind searches its internal library of past experiences, and a solution emerges almost instantly. But this impressive mental speed carries a hidden cost, because the same shortcuts that accelerate thinking can quietly limit it. Here the story circles back to the Einstellung Effect. Past experience sometimes becomes a powerful mental magnet. Once the brain discovers a reliable solution, it begins to prefer that solution even when a better path sits directly in front of us. Familiar methods feel comfortable, efficient, and safe. The mind returns to them automatically, almost reflexively. Over time, a subtle form of intellectual tunnel vision begins to form. A new problem appears. The brain searches its memory and quickly identifies something similar. The old solution rushes forward and claims control of the situation. The thinking process feels smooth and confident. Yet somewhere beyond that familiar path, more elegant or creative solutions remain invisible. Psychologists often describe this as a kind of cognitive rigidity. The mind becomes organized around what it already knows, and knowledge begins shaping perception itself. The German word Einstellung roughly translates to mental set or mindset. In psychology, it describes the powerful tendency to approach problems using previously successful strategies. Some discussions loosely translate this concept as professional blindness or expertise blindness, yet the idea extends far beyond professional life. The Einstellung Effect represents a broader cognitive bias, one that influences students, experts, scientists, artists, and everyday decision-makers alike. The fascinating part of this phenomenon lies in its paradox. Experience builds intelligence, yet experience can also quietly reduce flexibility. Knowledge expands the mind, yet knowledge can also narrow its field of vision. And the deeper our expertise grows, the stronger this effect can become. Because every solved problem teaches the brain a lesson. Every successful method leaves behind a mental footprint. And sometimes those footprints guide us down the same road long after better roads appear. The Einstellung Effect often reveals itself in classrooms long before it appears in laboratories. A student sits in front of a difficult problem, staring at the page for minutes that slowly stretch into frustration. The mind searches through memory, retrieves familiar formulas, familiar methods, familiar procedures, and begins assembling them piece by piece. Yet something strange happens in that moment. The student keeps circling the same strategy again and again. Creativity fades into the background, while the brain stubbornly insists on using what it already knows. Knowledge provides tools, yet those same tools can quietly lock the mind into a rigid pattern of thinking. The brain prefers the familiar route, even when a faster, simpler, more elegant path sits right in front of it. Psychologists first documented this phenomenon in a series of fascinating experiments conducted in 1942 by the researcher Abraham Luchins. Through these experiments, Luchins demonstrated how strongly previous experience can shape the way people approach new problems. The word Einstellung comes from German, carrying meanings related to adjustment, mindset, or mental attitude. In psychological terms, it describes the powerful tendency of the human mind to adapt itself to solutions it already understands. Once the brain learns a successful method, it begins to trust that method deeply, sometimes so deeply that alternative solutions never even enter awareness. One of the most famous demonstrations of this idea became known as the water jar experiment. Imagine standing in front of 3 containers filled with water. Each container holds a different amount. The task sounds simple. Measure a specific quantity of water using the jars available. Participants in Luchins' experiment received 3 jars with different capacities. For example, imagine these containers. Jar A holds 127 units of water. Jar B holds 21 units of water. Jar C holds 3 units of water. Participants received a challenge. Measure exactly 100 units of water using only these jars. At first glance, the task looks like a puzzle. Yet the participants gradually discover a reliable method. They begin filling jar B, then subtracting water using jar A and jar C in a repeated pattern. After solving several practice problems, the participants develop a mental formula that works again and again. Through repetition, the brain learns a procedure. The method becomes comfortable, familiar, efficient. And this moment marks the exact point where the Einstellung Effect quietly begins to form. In the first 5 problems, the correct solution followed a fairly complicated pattern. Participants solved the puzzles using a formula that looked something like this: A minus B minus 2C. After repeating this process several times, the participants developed a strong habit. The mind loves habits because habits reduce effort. Once a method works repeatedly, the brain treats it as the default solution. Then Luchins introduced the real test. The 6th problem looked similar on the surface, but contained a hidden twist. Participants received 3 new jars with different capacities. Jar A held 23 liters. Jar B held 49 liters. Jar C held 3 liters. The challenge sounded simple again. Measure exactly 20 liters of water. At this point, something fascinating happened. Most participants immediately applied the same complex formula they had used in the earlier exercises. Their brains had already formed a mental pathway, and that pathway activated almost automatically. The participants started calculating the problem using the long method they had practiced. The solution worked, but the path they chose was unnecessarily complicated. A far simpler solution existed. Take jar A, which holds 23 liters. and remove 3 liters using jar C. That single step leaves exactly 20 liters. One quick move, one elegant solution. Yet most participants never noticed it. Approximately 74% of the people in the experiment continued using the complicated formula they had learned earlier. Their experience guided them toward a longer path, even though a much simpler route sat directly in front of them. This moment perfectly illustrates the Einstellung Effect. The participants possessed the knowledge necessary to solve the problem. They possessed the intelligence to recognize the simpler solution. Yet their previous success with a specific strategy created a mental blind spot. The familiar method dominated their thinking so completely that alternative solutions never received attention. The mind followed the well-worn path, and the obvious shortcut remained invisible. The Einstellung Effect rarely stays confined to psychology laboratories. Its influence quietly spreads through classrooms, workplaces, creative industries, and everyday decision-making. Once you begin noticing it, the pattern appears almost everywhere. A student learns a topic using one specific method and grows comfortable with that approach. When a more efficient learning technique appears, curiosity fades, and the old method quietly takes control again. The brain already knows how that strategy works, so it chooses familiarity over exploration. Experienced managers often fall into a similar pattern. Strategies that once brought success gradually transform into rigid frameworks. Markets evolve, technology shifts, competitors adapt. Yet decision-makers sometimes continue applying yesterday's logic to today's reality. The mind searches for solutions inside its archive of past victories. Teachers experience the same tendency. A teaching method proves effective for years, perhaps even decades. Over time, that method becomes part of professional identity. New educational approaches emerge, yet hesitation appears. The familiar path feels reliable. The unfamiliar path requires experimentation. And in that quiet moment of hesitation, the Einstellung Effect reveals itself again. The human brain naturally strengthens the mental pathways it uses most often. Every time a particular strategy succeeds, the neural connections supporting that strategy grow stronger. Repetition reinforces the network. Familiar thinking patterns become increasingly efficient. Behind this tendency lies a powerful evolutionary advantage. Throughout human history, survival depended on speed and efficiency. Early humans who could quickly recall useful strategies, finding food, identifying danger, navigating environments, held a clear advantage. The brain evolved to conserve time, focus, and energy whenever possible. Reusing existing knowledge saves enormous cognitive effort. Instead of constructing a brand new solution for every challenge, the brain retrieves previously successful methods. This shortcut allows us to function smoothly in a complex world filled with constant decisions. Yet that same efficiency can quietly become a limitation. The mind begins to prefer existing knowledge so strongly that it resists unfamiliar perspectives. Psychologists often describe this phenomenon as the curse of knowledge. Once we understand something deeply, it becomes surprisingly difficult to imagine thinking without that knowledge. And this limitation does not spare intelligence. Brilliant scientists, successful entrepreneurs, experienced professionals, all of them remain vulnerable to this cognitive bias. In many cases, deep expertise actually strengthens the effect. The more experience a person accumulates, the stronger the mental patterns become. Creativity asks the brain to step outside those patterns. That process takes time. It requires the mind to loosen old connections and build new ones. And that effort demands something the brain naturally tries to conserve: energy. Yet mental flexibility can grow through deliberate habits. One powerful approach involves maintaining a healthy distance from what we already know. Knowledge provides valuable tools, yet curiosity keeps those tools from becoming cages. When a familiar solution appears immediately, pause for a moment and ask a simple question. What other possibilities might exist here? Another strategy involves embracing lateral thinking, a style of thinking that intentionally moves outside conventional patterns. Instead of following the most obvious path, lateral thinking encourages exploration of unusual angles, unexpected connections, and unconventional solutions. Exposure to new ideas also plays an important role. The brain builds richer networks when it encounters diverse perspectives, unfamiliar disciplines, and different intellectual traditions. A physicist reading philosophy, an artist studying mathematics, a programmer exploring psychology. These cross-connections often unlock surprising creativity. Experience itself becomes more powerful when it expands across multiple fields. Each new perspective adds another pathway inside the mind. And the more pathways the brain possesses, the less likely it becomes to follow a single, rigid route. In the end, the lesson of the Einstellung Effect carries an interesting paradox. Knowledge remains one of humanity's greatest strengths. At the same time, knowledge reaches its full potential only when curiosity continues guiding the mind forward. Mental flexibility grows when we question our assumptions, explore unfamiliar ideas, and allow ourselves to learn again and again. The brain thrives on discovery. Encourage it to keep asking questions. Encourage it to keep exploring. And every once in a while, invite it to forget the obvious answer, just long enough to notice a better one waiting nearby.